All right, for the final bits of this module here, I would like to go over this test method, test person collector. And I want to walk you through about every assertion over here, and also to visualize the object creation and method call. Let's do it properly. Okay, I already made available the source code to you, so you can just go under the person's package and go to person collector test person collector.java, and that's something I already showed to you earlier about how to step into the execution for equals method. I would suggest you reproduce it yourself, and you can also look at other parts for the test cases as well. But let's now only focus on the paper for this final bit. Okay, the first part, okay, it's really the same test, but I just split it into different parts just for our convenience. Okay, let's do the first one. Okay, so basically we are creating 3 persons over here to begin with. Okay, and for simplicity, I just give them easy names to actually write A, and B. Okay, let's now visualize them. Okay, for the first objects, we got first name A, last name A, and also the weights and also heights. Okay, let's now do the second one. Similarly, AA 180 So you can see apparently P1 and P2, they are content equal. 180, 1.8, and also what about P3? BB 200 and 2.1. 200 and also 2.1. Okay, and we also got one line over here which will create an alias for some objects. Right, so we're gonna let P4 point to wherever P3 is pointing to, right, by copying address. So P4 is going to point to wherever P3 is pointing to over here. Okay, we still got 3 objects, but we got 4 address variables. And let's now do assertion quickly. So what about the first one? P1 equals P2. Apparently that's false because they are different objects over here, right? And what about P1? Let me just do all the address comparison first. What about P3 equals P4? So P3 equals P4. Yes, they are pointing to the same objects. And remember we said before, as long as they are reference equal, the contents must be equal, right? So that's why this will just pass automatically, conceptually. But we still walk it through quickly. I just want to make a point. So this is something you want to recall. From the earlier exercise, reference equal actually being implies contents equal. Right, that's the exercise we did earlier. You can refer to it. Okay, but vice versa will not actually apply. Okay, let's look at the 2 method calls for the equals method. The first one over here. Let's say P1 dot equals P2. Okay, so now what's the dynamic type for P1, the context objects? Apparently it is going to be person. That means we're going to call the equals method the overridden version in the person class, which is over here. Okay, let's now box it just to let you know which one we're calling. This one here. Okay, and then we know that we're going to invoke, based on the dynamic type for P1, we're going to invoke this version here. And let's see exactly how it is going to be executed. So we're going to execute this block of code. First of all, P1 and P2, are they going to satisfy this particular constraint, given that P1 is actually this? Apparently not, because they are not pointing to the same object, right? You can see they're pointing to different objects. What about object being null? In this case, obj is actually P2, right? You can see P2 over here. Is P2 null? It is not null. So it will be false. And what about their dynamic type? Are their dynamic type different? No, actually their dynamic type is actually the same. You can see, so here you can see P1 and also P2. The get class should really give you the person back, right? Over here, exactly. So person and also person. Let me just make a note just for this one here. So this will be P1.get class. And similarly, that will be P2.get class. So this will also be false. We're going to bypass. Okay, so that means we're going to do the casting. And then, so it's going to be like a other. So other is going to actually point to wherever you can think about other is actually going to point to this particular person class, but its static type is going to be person, so that we can actually do the we can actually invoke the attributes on that. Okay, if we try to compare this, okay, so that's something I wouldn't need to go into much detail. We just compare side by side. So here you can say A compare with A compare with A, and the way we do that is by invoking the string equals method from the string class, right? So for these two values. Okay, just to remind you. You can see this equals over here is going to be from the string class. Okay, you can see the values are simply the same over here, and also value for the measure are also the same. So that's why it's going to be true over here. So what about P3 and P4? Right? If you do it, actually this will be actually interesting to see. It is actually going to pass. However, it's going to return pass for a slightly different reason. Okay. So what if we try to do P3 that equals P4? Well, apparently you can see P3 dynamic type is actually over here, right? Person. So we're still going to execute this block of code. Will we actually reach this particular return statements for invoking this equals method? The answer is no, because when we actually reach the very first, let me use a purple over here. Let's say when we actually reach this line over here, specifically over here, you can see when we execute it, P3 the context object and P4 the arguments, P3 equals P4. So that means we're going to return true right away in this case. So that's how it is going to pass. So very important for you to actually exercise when you study for this. It's like this. Okay, for these two, exercise. How are these two assertions passed differently? They both will pass, but they pass in a different way by invoking different parts of the equals method. That's actually over here, as we explained, right? That's an exercise for you when you actually review the notes. All right, so that's for the first part. Let's now go to the second part.